Hey everybody, I just want to briefly talk about some new developments arising in the bidding process for the 2026 World Cup, which is being held in 10 years' time um, from this summer, of course. And just to go over briefly some potential bidders, some bidders who have already been confirmed, as well as my own thoughts on what country would probably be the best candidate to host the World Cup. And looking at the bidding process now so far, now we already know that Qatar is hosting in 2022, barring any kind of major scandal or new development arising that the bid was indeed bought back in 2010 when Qatar was named as the host for 2022. They're going to host it. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it not because it's in the Middle East. I disagree with it because of the bribery behind it, that many FIFA officials had their votes bought in millions of dollars of Gulf money, and the fact that Qatar itself, geographically speaking, is a very tiny country. It doesn't have the infrastructure or the stadiums to host such a tournament. Conditions are super hot and humid that they're trying to move the World Cup to accommodate it in the winter, and they're trying to squeeze it in the space of 3 weeks, and I just don't agree with that. I think it's so stupid. It's entirely ridiculous to move the World Cup, which is supposed to be a summer event, into the wintertime and to squeeze it into 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to disrupt the European leagues and other domestic soccer leagues all around the world in all 6 continents. It's just going to be a mess. And on top of that, Qatar is being accused now of constructing their stadia via the usage of, well, wage worker slavery. And if that's the case, then that's a damn shame. That's a huge human rights violation. And Qatar has no business hosting the World Cup in 2022. But, you know, uh, it looks like it's going to go ahead. It's going to happen, unfortunately. So the only thing that other countries can do about it right now at this point is to put in their bid and their best hopes for the 2026 World Cup. And we already have here a few rumored bids potentially coming out from Africa and one country in South America, I believe, as well as several CONCACAF bids from Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And I'll get to that in just a moment. So, looking at the bidding process and looking at the cycle, the rotation of how FIFA awards its bidding rights, it would make sense. I'm going to say it right now. It would make sense for the 2026 World Cup to either go to Europe or to go to the Americas, specifically CONCACAF North America. Why? Well, because 2022, if Qatar does indeed host it, Qatar is part of the AFC, the Asian Football Confederation, which means that 4 years later, it's going to be literally impossible for an Asian country to host it because that would be in violation of the rotation rule. So, awarding the World Cup to like China or Australia or Japan, as fun as that would be to watch, it wouldn't be fair because you want to expand the frontier to all nations. And also, Asia already hosted a World Cup as early as 2002 in South Korea and Japan. Now, why not South America? Well, Brazil just hosted 2 years ago. And now you're going to bring a World Cup back to South America in just 2 or 3 World Cup cycles later? I mean, I know the difference between 2014 and 2026 is 12 years. And it sounds like a long time, doesn't it? But it's not a long time because the World Cup is every 4 years. So I know that Colombia has expressed an interest in hosting 2026. They were supposed to host in 1986, but at the last minute they had to cancel because they weren't properly prepared for it. So what happened was FIFA awarded it to Mexico at the last minute in order to save or salvage any vestige of a World Cup being held. And Mexico held the World Cup 16 years after hosting it officially in 1970. So I don't know if Colombia is going to be ready in 2026, but even if they are, I would not favor another South American World Cup this close to the Brazil one that we just had 2 years ago. So I don't think it should go to Asia. I don't think it should go to South America. Africa, Africa's a tricky thing. I mean, we just had a World Cup in 2010, South Africa. The only African country that has expressed interest so far in hosting has been Morocco. And I can kind of understand a case for Morocco hosting it because South Africa is completely different from Northern Africa because Northern Africa is all Arabic Middle Eastern countries like Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria. The completely different cultures, completely different geographical region because Africa is an enormous continent, different culture as well. But the one weakness I see with a Morocco bid is that 4 years after the 2022 World Cup, is FIFA really going to award another Arab nation a World Cup right after Qatar with the same language, almost the same geographical location? I mean, Qatar is closer to Morocco than it is to South Africa. So, and it's the same, almost the same culture exactly. So that would be a major stark weakness in Morocco's bid. So if Morocco is indeed the only country that's going to express interest in hosting, like it seems how it is so far, I would say don't give it to Africa. So that leaves what? That leaves Europe and it leaves North America. Now, Europe, usually under the old rotation rule, Europe hosted the World Cup every 8 years. So, meaning that the World Cup will be hosted in Europe, and then 4 years later, another continent, and then Europe, and then a different continent, and then Europe. And since that rotation rule has now been thrown out the window, since South Africa and Brazil hosted two consecutive World Cups that were held outside of Europe, 2010, 2014, Russia in 2018 will indeed be the first European World Cup in 12 years since 2006 when Germany hosted it. I remember the 2006 World Cup. I was a teenager. I watched it. It was very exciting. So I think bringing the World Cup back to Europe in 2026 would probably be a good idea. But also, you look at the Americas. North America has not hosted a World Cup in almost 30 years. But sticking to Europe now for a second, the only European country right now, it's still early, guys. Anything can change in the next year or two because FIFA's not expected to decide on it until 2020. The only European country so far that has expressed open interest in hosting is England. And I think England would actually be an excellent choice. I think England would be a good choice because, number one, England has not hosted the World Cup in 50 something years. Now, by 2026, England will have not hosted the World Cup in 60 years. England hosted the World Cup in 1966. And England is the birth country of football, the sport that we all love. It is where it all began. Football was given birth in the late 1800s in England. England is a football fanatic country. It has the stadiums, it has the infrastructure, it has the culture, it has the fan base, it has the transportation necessary to take fans to and from stadiums, it has the hotels, it has the tourist industry. An English World Cup would be fantastic. So I think England would be a good choice. Now, let's go to the Americas, North America for now. The United States has not formally made a bid yet. They haven't confirmed an interest to host yet, but let's be honest, the United States is going to submit a bid for the 2026 World Cup. The United States very clearly feels that it was screwed over in the 2022 World Cup bid via Qatari bribery. So it's going to feel that the 2026 is its best shot. In fact, I think the United States would be considered favorites to host it if they did bid for 2026. And I think they will. I think they will. Mexico has confirmed, actually, that they are interested in bidding. And a World Cup in Mexico, I think, would be amazing. I think it would be amazing. Mexico is another football crazy country. It has the stadiums. It has the experience of hosting the World Cup twice. And they're trying to become now the only country in the world to host the World Cup 3 times. But here's the thing. The fact that they hosted it twice already is going to hurt them. Because one of the main criteria that FIFA always looks for when awarding a World Cup to a host country is trying to broaden the horizon of the sport of football to new frontiers so that the sport can grow. And whether or not Mexico receives a World Cup, it's irrelevant to the growth of the sport in Mexico because soccer is always going to be popular. It always has been popular in Mexico. It always will be popular in Mexico. So I think that Mexico's experience in hosting the World Cup is just as much of an advantage as it is a disadvantage. And I don't think that FIFA would take that risk of giving them yet a third World Cup. Now, Canada, our neighbors to the north. Canada is not a traditional soccer country. The main sport is hockey. Its soccer team is up and coming. It's not that good, but they're okay. But Canada is a very appealing option, and the United States needs to be careful because Canada is stiffer competition to get the hosting rights than many Americans would think. Because Canada has the same thing with England, guys. They have the tourist industry. They have the stadiums on hand ready to host the World Cup tomorrow, even if they wanted to. They have the infrastructure. They have the transportation. It's a very safe country. Many people around the world love Canada. Canada has a positive image globally. And it would grow a World Cup in Canada, much like the Women's World Cup last summer in Canada, where the United States won. It would grow the sport there in popularity. Many people would be getting into it. And all arguments saying that, oh no, attendance would be low, that's ridiculous. Because we see now in World Cup qualifying matches with the Canadian soccer team, they're filling out stadiums. 50,000 people, 60,000 people, 70,000. I was watching a World Cup qualifying game between Canada and Mexico back in March in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the stadium was packed. Mexico destroyed Canada, of course, but the Canadian fans were really into it, and stadiums were full at the Women's World Cup last year. So I think Canada is a very tempting decision for 2026. I think they can steal it. They can win. So the United States needs to be careful. Now, I'm American, so I want the World Cup to be in the United States. So I think the United States should bid for 2026 because I think the chances of the World Cup returning to North America will be very high. That's why all 3 main North American countries are of the NAFTA agreement are bidding for it: Mexico, USA, and Canada. So I think the United States would have the strongest case to make. The United States has more than enough of a fan base because the United States is a very ethnically diverse country. We have millions of Hispanics. We have millions of European Americans. We have we have more than enough stadiums. We have at least 30 or 40 stadiums that are good to go right away. Um, we have the transportation. We have everything capable, everything here to host a World Cup. And you don't believe me? You look at 1994, when we hosted the World Cup in 1994, it set record attendance in stadiums. No World Cup since 1994. We've had 5 World Cups since 1994. Not a single one of them has sold more tickets than the United States World Cup in 1994. Not a single one. The United States holds the record the year after I was born, 1994, of sellout record number of attendance. And if we get the World Cup in 2026, it'll far exceed that number, that expectation. It'll be the most financially profitable World Cup in history. So, looking at the 2026 World Cup, I think that the best possible choice, personally, not just because I'm biased, but looking at it from an objective standpoint, is the United States. Second choice would probably either be Canada or England, and third would probably be Mexico. So I think the United States, Canada, Mexico, or England should get the hosting rights for 2026. Either one of them would be a great choice. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Like, subscribe. Who do you want to see host the World Cup in 2026? What do you think's going to happen? What is your whole opinion on the matter of the bidding process? And thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.